G'day and welcome back to Reality Check. I'm your host, Ross Coulthart, and today I'm absolutely delighted to be able to welcome Republican Senator Marion Rounds. And I'll say Marion for a specific reason we'll explain soon. He's represented South Dakota in the US Senate since 2015. He was previously in the South Dakota State Senate and Governor of South Dakota from 2003 to 2011. A science graduate and a businessman before he entered politics, Senator Rounds serves on many committees, most notably for our purposes, the Senate Intelligence and the Senate Armed Services Committees. And Senator, I noticed that one of your forebears, your uncle Marion, you're named after him, and I didn't think I should let it pass without observing that it's 80 years ago, almost to the week, that he made the ultimate sacrifice on Okinawa for both of our country's freedom.
That's correct. He was a young Marine. He passed away, we believe, on the 18th day of June in 1945, and he is my namesake, Marion. He was named for his father, Marion Mather. And so it took a while. I had always been told that I had been named after my uncle, but his name, he was always referred to as June. And it never dawned on me as a 10-year-old that was Junior. And so we knew him as Marion, who had passed away. And so he's been a part of the story that we talk about sacrifice and about the loss of an uncle that none of us ever knew.
Well, it's a sobering thing to think that 80 years ago he made that sacrifice, but I wouldn't want to let it pass without you being assured that it's a sacrifice my country, Australia, deeply respects, and as I'm sure you do as well.
Well, thank you.
So,
And I,
sir,
I know that you had young men and women who have served and who have sacrificed as well, and it's something that we hold in common.
thank you. You were instrumental with the then Senate Majority Leader, Chuck Schumer, in 2023 in leading the amendment to the National Defence Authorization Act, which mandated government records related to UAPs carrying a presumption of disclosure. And as we all know, that legislation was watered down and made less powerful, but you still managed to get something through the House, and it's in power at the moment. The full UAP Disclosure Act laws, though, the laws that would hopefully force the release of UAP files and records, they're still not being put through the House. And I'm just keen to know, sir, the obvious first question is, are we going to see a reintroduction of the UAP Disclosure Act? Are you going to try and get it through the Congress once again this year?
I've been informed that Senator Schumer would like to partner once again, and that we would offer it again this year in the National Defense Authorization Act, which we'll begin working on here in the next few weeks. So the answer is yes, we intend to move forward once again, and we modeled this originally after the Kennedy assassination reports and the committee that was established to release the timely information that we had available, but to make a decision on that one to release information based on its not only its need but its appropriateness. We thought the same type of approach that successfully released a huge amount of information on the Kennedy assassination would be the appropriate way to look at any information that was available on the issue of what was at that time UFOs.
Perhaps the most significant thing about that original legislation was that, as well as it being an incredible 64 pages of proposed UAP disclosure legislation, it was an incredibly powerful piece of legislation if it had gone through in the original form that was proposed. It mentioned non-human intelligence, NHI, 24 times. It's a very bold statement, isn't it, by the Senate and by the Congress of intention. You seem to be suggesting there that there is a there to be found.
You know, our intent was to make sure that there wasn't an assumption by folks who were following it that we were trying to hide anything. And our goal was to say, look, if there is any of this, which, a lot of folks out there have questioned whether or not after all these years there was contact that we had with entities, intelligence that was not of this earth and so forth. We just thought rather than beating around the bush, let's just say, look, if there's any of that out there, then let's disclose it. Let's make that available, or at least collect it. And then at some point, based upon a commission's review of it, to determine any national security concerns, to be able to share that information at the appropriate time. It was not put in there because of any evidence that I had or that I believe Senator Schumer had that would suggest that we had a smoking gun, but rather, let's have clarity. Let's lay this thing out and make sure that the American public would know that if there was such information that existed, we were directing that it be preserved and that it be delivered for appropriate persons and for review by this select committee.
Senator, would you like to see the original legislation passed in its original proposed form? Is that a possibility, or are you looking at changing that legislation in any way from what was originally proposed, I think, in July 2023?
I have no objections to submitting the legislation in its current form, but I would also work with my House counterparts to allay any concerns that they may have. And once again, look, my background on this is working on the Senate Intel Committee, the Intelligence Committee, but also on the Armed Services Committee. And I can tell you that we do a lot of research and we've got advanced projects going on all the time. And what we didn't want to have happen was a demand for exposure on weapon systems, capabilities, and so forth that might otherwise be found or reported out or disclosed in an inappropriate way. Many people have talked now about the development of stealth, and I think now there's more and more discussion on the fact that there were some plans out there that allowed some of these stealth weapons to be unidentified for an extended period of time on purpose. And and the purpose and the reason for it is because for national defense purposes. In those particular cases where we have items out there that might very well be ours, we may very well not want to be able, we may not want to disclose that information, and it's appropriate to keep it private. The same if we know of other weapon systems by other countries, we may not want to disclose it, but we wanted a place where it could at least be collected and an independent organization could look at it and be able to disclose that which was not subject to national defense concerns.
There is a strident side, of course, in the UAP commentary community that says that everything should just be released. But I agree with you. I think there are things that need to be protected for national security reasons. Let's talk about a hypothetical. Let's make the point that at the heart of all of this is the primary allegation that's been made by people like David Grush, and more recently an interview I did with a gentleman called Jake Barber, who allegedly was involved in retrieval of craft on a place he calls the Range, euphemistically. There's an allegation at the heart of all of this that the Congress has been denied information by the executive branch about something that Congress constitutionally should have been informed about. If it turns out that, for example, the United States has recovered incredibly non-human technology, perhaps even craft and bodies, biologics, as some people assert, if that's true and that has not been properly disclosed to Congress, and yet, by all accounts, billions, perhaps trillions of dollars have been expended on such a program, do you see any reason why, on national security grounds, that ought not to be disclosed to the public? That's the key issue. I mean, are you guys going to cave at the last minute and say, well, if we do have a flying saucer in a cave, it should not be revealed to the public for national security reasons? Can you see any reason why that wouldn't be allowed to be revealed?
Well, there are two items here. You do have a hypothetical. We're not aware of anything along that line that's ever been hidden from Congress directly that we're aware of. Also, the second part of it is We don't know if there was something out there. Was it actually disclosed to some members of Congress who have continued to keep it quiet based upon their concerns about the release? We don't know. We don't know it. So it really is a series of hypotheticals that you're asking me. But let me continue on, because I think really, if I could put it in a simpler way, let's just say that there had been a meeting or a contact with something that we didn't believe was from this world, whether it, from another country or from our own resources. At that point, I think there's going to come a time here in which the American public and people from around the world are going to look at it and say, it really would be crazy for us to believe that we really were alone in the world or in the universe and that there is no other intelligent life form out there. But it would be a matter of how you would disclose it correctly and in what would be one of the greatest announcements in the history of mankind, that we are not alone. I really don't believe that that is necessarily what's happened here, but we do know, and this is the part that is so sensitive to us, there are some things that we can't explain out there. And that's the reason why I really got involved in this in the first place, is if we know that there are technologies there that appear to do things that physically we're just not sure how it's getting done, biggest concern I had was, is it ours? Or does it belong to somebody else on this earth, one of our adversaries? Or is it really something that is out of this world? But in any of those events, two of the three would be very serious if we disclosed it to the American public, because it would mean national defense issues are being broached. And that would be if it would be one of our adversaries' capabilities or one of our own capabilities. The third alternative, which I wouldn't be afraid of seeing someday, but it can't, we haven't seen that yet. It's not something that any of us have been able to, that I've been able to identify. I'm not aware of any of it. But I know that there are things that we don't know how to identify today. Does that help?
It does, sir. It does. Why do you think that original UAP disclosure legislation, it got through the Senate in 2023, and then it was blocked reportedly by Representatives Mike Rogers and Mike Turner? If there's nothing to hide, and this is the question I keep on coming back to, and a lot of people ask me, if there's nothing to hide, why was there any opposition in the House to being more transparent on UAPs?
Look, I respect both of those members of the House. They are honorable individuals. They are true Americans that are patriotic. My only assessment right now, other than direct contact with them, is that they had concerns that it might disclose very sensitive information about either our adversaries' capabilities or about our own capabilities. And without proof that it might be some other alternative out there, it could very well have damaged our own national security. And I really think they were concerned about the release of any information that might give away our capabilities that we otherwise don't disclose today. So from my perspective, I respect what they had to say, but I'd really like to be able to get around that and get back down to what our original intent was, which was to satisfy the curiosity of the American public and people around the world. Is there actually information that we have that we haven't disclosed that might be out there, or that contractors might have that we're not aware of here at the congressional level, or materials that may very well have, that we don't know where it came from, but we haven't been able to figure out anything about? Those are fair questions to ask. And in the future, if we do find information about items that we don't know where it comes from, I don't want to have it get lost. I'd rather have it be kept in an archive that could be protected until such time as a separate independent committee could decide it would be appropriate to release to the public.
So in July last year, you again reintroduced a version of the UAP Disclosure Act to have another go as a possible amendment to the 2025 National Defence Authorization Act, and it resembled very much the original version. It was a UAP records collection with a presumption of disclosure, an independent, presidentially approved UAP records review board with subpoena and eminent domain powers. It was asserting that you would have the power of essentially confiscation by the state, eminent domain under technology of unknown origin and evidence of non-human intelligence. And it was looking good. You had co-sponsors, including Democrats Senator Gillibrand and Martin Heinrich. What happened? Why did it get knocked back last year?
In part because the NDAA can be complicated, and getting improvements on the NDAA can be very challenging. And in this particular case, the politics of it weren't there to get it included. It just flat out, it wasn't there to get it included at that time. We needed support on both the House and the Senate side. It simply did not exist last year.
How's the politics looking now, sir?
You know, I believe it's changing a little bit. First of all, we have a change in leadership in the Senate. Chuck Schumer is still one of the leaders, but he is not the majority leader. He is the minority leader this year. In the House, there have been some changes in the House with regard to leadership there within those particular committees. So there's an opportunity to once again readdress it. We don't know whether or not this is something that would be added on as a floor amendment or if it could be included someplace in a manager's package. That will be determined based on opposition within the committee itself. But at this stage of the game, I think it's worth trying again, and once again trying to reassure the American people that those of us that are here, we're not trying to hide anything, but we will protect very clearly those items of national interest with regard to our national security. And I think most people understand that. I do know also, as you've probably seen some rumors out there, that way back in the 1950s and the 1960s, there was, in some cases, there may have been some overt attempts to actually create some thought that there were items of UFOs that we just couldn't explain, and they were being used to actually hide some of the more advanced weapon systems that we were developing at that time. I think that's part of the story that has to be told in the future as well.
I know the Wall Street Journal, in a two-part series, they recently tried to suggest that essentially pretty much all UFO stories are essentially a result of that disinformation. Do you buy into that? Do you think it's likely that all of this talk of UFOs is just the result of a US Air Force hazing disinformation operation?
I can't say that that would take care of all of the issues that I've seen or that I've questioned, but it takes care of a great deal of them. The development of our stealth systems and the development of our high-speed aircraft, particularly some of our supersonic bombers at that time that we were looking at, and the high-flying observation aircraft, the SR-71 as an example, and so forth. Those items, I think, had been identified on a number of different occasions as something that nobody else knew about because of the speed and altitude at which they were flying. And when you're bringing them in or around some classified areas, a lot of people probably had the opportunity to observe them on a very short notice or intermittently. And I thought maybe there was something going on there. The other item on it, though, I think is the development of stealth technology also means the development of some very unique types of material that look out of this world. And some of those items that were recovered may very well have been part of the development of our stealth technology that we utilize today.
I agree with you, sir. I actually do think that the UFO excuse was used as disinformation to try and distract people from things like the stealth program. But as you do, I don't think it explains everything. The other thing about that Wall Street Journal story is it seriously tried to suggest that the US Air Force in the mid-1960s put an electromagnetic pulse through live thermonuclear weapons to see whether or not there was a resistance to those electromagnetic pulses. Do you think that's a plausible explanation by the Air Force? I mean, I just, for the life of me, couldn't believe that the US Air Force would do anything as irresponsible as to put an EMP pulse through live thermonuclear weapons.
I, I can't speak specifically to that, but I know that we've done a great deal of research with regard to EMPs. It is a threat. It is, I'm not even sure that, I won't get into great detail, but I can tell you that an EMP as a weapon system is something that we have had to study. We have studied. Our adversaries have looked at those as a weapon system. And the reason is because you can have an EMP that could be released that could do a great deal of damage, either in space or, for that matter, near the ground, if done correctly. But it would do more damage to a lot of electronic equipment, but not necessarily do damage to humans or to structures. And so there has been a discussion about EMPs, and I think most of that's public knowledge.
You've made it clear, Senator, that you're keeping an open mind on the possibilities of what explains this UAP mystery. But as Chris Mellon has said, he said US officials responsible for analysing thousands of military UAP reports submitted to the Pentagon have acknowledged data confirming the presence of intelligently controlled vehicles exhibiting technological capabilities we do not understand and cannot replicate. These are explicitly not secret US aerospace platforms. Do you agree with that sentiment from Mr. Mellon?
I think there is a probability that he could be correct. But what we don't know is how, with as siloed as we keep some of our projects, it's entirely possible that one part of our organization in the Defense Department does not know what another part of the organization is doing. I can tell you that that happens today.
Oh, we have a saying in my line of work: always assume a screw up before a conspiracy. So I think we're on the same track.
But I would say, look, I've seen some of the materials, and I have not, and I've talked to folks who have tried to analyze it, and the individuals that I've talked to have shared that they do not have all the answers for a number of these recorded uh, 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 vehicles, for lack of a better term, these assets that we've seen out there. Some of it we can't explain, and the problem is I can't tell you certain because I don't know whether it would belong to another country or whether it is an exquisite product that's been experimented with one of our unique agencies that does not disclose what they're doing to anybody else. Uh, that's entirely possible too. So once again, and I'm not trying to dodge it, I simply don't know. What I
Sure.
do know is that there are items out there that exist that we, as either members of Congress or as some of the folks within the departments that normally would tell us what they are, that they don't know what they are either. But I can't tell you where they come from.
So let's talk about various comments that have been made recently. The former ARROW, the Pentagon's UAP Investigation Office Deputy Director, Tim Phillips, recently suggested that members of the UAP caucus in Congress, and I know you're not a member of that caucus, were denied access to special access programs by their own congressional leadership, not because of intervention by ARROW or the Department of Defense. Do you know anything about this, sir? Do you think there's any obstruction from anyone you're seeing in Congress currently, especially where
No,
you are in the Senate?
I I don't believe so, but I can tell you that there are items that I see on the Intel committee that other members don't get to see. That there are items on the Armed Services Committee that some members on the Intel Committee don't get to see, and they are advanced or they're extremely sensitive items, and simply because of the compartmentation of those products, you may have members that are denied access to it. And I do know that that does exist today, that limitation. I don't believe that it is necessarily one to keep information away from a specific group, but it's one of kind of a need to know type basis. I have seen that. And I know there's information out there that some other members may very well have access to that I don't have access to. So there, it's simply a matter of trying to maintain some of the nation's most important secrets. They will maintain, and not all members get all information. It is on a need-to-know basis.
Senator, one of the issues that I have to deal with as a reporter is I've been involved in helping break the story with David Grush, the former NGIA intelligence officer. And earlier this year, I also brought to light the story of Jake Barber, who has made very specific allegations. And I know he's given evidence to your committee in camera, where he essentially detailed named officials, named companies involved, detailing a retrieval program being operated by people in the United States government in collaboration with a known private aerospace company or companies. One of the issues that's being cited to me constantly by people who I'm also talking to inside the so-called legacy UAP program is that it's the compartmentalization, the secrecy that's hindering our own development of this technology. There's a very genuine fear from people working in this program that the Russians or the Chinese are securing a strategic advantage against us with the application of this technology. And I know that's a big ask because, of course, officially, it's not real. But is that a possibility that compartmentalization is actually hindering our ability to develop this technology in a way that perhaps our potential foreign adversary rivals might actually have an advantage?
I can't say for certain that compartmentalization does not exist. What I can tell you is that we are aware that is a threat that we have tried to allay. We've discussed it on multiple occasions about the possibility that because of what I call the siloing, that one side doesn't know what the other side's doing. And that part has been of concern because of the secrecy involved in each entity trying to maintain the highest degree of confidentiality. So that part, I would agree, plays a role in how we disseminate information or coordinate information. But let me be clear about one piece. I've agreed that I try to talk to anybody that has firsthand knowledge of actually working on projects. In fact, I told my team that I don't have an interest in talking to people that have secondhand knowledge or that will relay information to me without evidence that they have firsthand knowledge of any particular type of materials or projects. I've talked to individuals that have told me their firsthand knowledge of things that they can't explain. But I have never gotten to the point where I could determine what it was as an item or a project or a platform, that what it really is. And so, are there things that I can't explain based upon direct information from individuals that have observed information or materials? The answer to that is yes. But I have nothing that would suggest that it is of out of this world origin, except that we can't explain at that point the physics that appeared to be employed. So whether it's from one of our adversaries or whether it's from a unique project here within the United States, I simply don't know, and I won't draw conclusions.
Is there any thought being given to perhaps enhancing the protections for whistleblowers to encourage those people from the alleged legacy program to come forward more willingly? There seems to be a fear amongst a lot of people in the program that they're going to face retribution, and that perhaps there are people, not yourself, but people in Congress who are compromised and who are very much at the behest of the aerospace or defence industry. And there's a genuine, I think, fear from people about coming forward. Should we be enhancing whistleblower protections in this proposed UAP disclosure legislation?
I think there is. I think it's a fair question. And I know that I've talked to a number of these individuals. I keep them private. I don't acknowledge any of them having come forward. I won't do that because I don't want them to be in a position of telling somebody else who might have had the same thing that, they got burned on a deal. So I won't disclose who I talked to, but that's one of the items that may very well be an item that we'll have to explore. I have not ruled that out. I don't know that the existing protections fail us, but I'm most certainly open to looking at improving them if that needs to be part of the process and opening things up in the future.
You and Senator Schumer have both said that credible sources have indicated that UAP information has been improperly, perhaps illegally, withheld from Congress. What steps are you taking to ensure that Congress, particularly the Intelligence and Defence Committees, can get access to this information?
Number one, it's one of the reasons why we wanted to create this separate committee, and we wanted to have a separate location where it was required that this information be compiled to. We didn't want private entities nor public government entities to be able to withhold or to destroy information, or that feared that if they did release the information now after being told that they were supposed to have done it earlier, that they would somehow then find themselves in a pickle because of legal wranglings about them failing to do it at an earlier date and so forth. So we wanted to make sure that if they did come forward, that there would not be a reprisal to them for having held it. And for private entities, we wanted to make sure that if they did have information or materials that would be important for long-term, science reviews and so forth, that if they released it back in and they gave it back to us, that they would not be in trouble or held accountable for having held that material. We just simply wanted to make it as simple as possible and as doable as possible for anybody that had anything out there to bring it forth. And we didn't want to have those people who were suspicious of us saying that we hadn't made it as easy as possible for entities or individuals to come forward and share their story. That was the reason why we tried to put that in the first place.
There was some criticism about one particular point that was in the original legislation, the eminent domain, which essentially gives the state the right to confiscate NHI technology or technology of unknown origin. Was eminent domain a mistake, and will it be going through in the new proposed UAP disclosure legislation?
I'll have to find out why individuals felt that that was a threat. I think part of it was to make it clear that if there were independent contractors that had material in their possession, that we could access it, and that if it was or materials that were critical to our national security, that we expected that it would be turned over. Whether or not that would be one of the issues that the House members had concerns with, fair discussion, but we'll have to work our way through that with them first to have them express their concerns to us.
And crucially, there's going to be, I suspect, I get the impression from talking to my own sources, there's a huge willingness at Senate level to be much more collaborative and consultative with the House on these issues in this proposed new legislation. Is that correct?
Yes, no question about it. And honestly, look, we didn't realize that there would be as much concern as there was in the House. We actually thought that they would be on board with us to begin with. So we'll work with them. Look, we've got to work together on this kind of stuff. And if there's a concern in particular that they have about the legislation, we're more than willing to work with them to overcome those concerns or to modify our request if there's a particular issue. I really believe that it was not so much to try to hide a conspiracy that they were in it, as much as they wanted to make absolutely certain that nothing that was of a security concern could be released. And I think that is a very valid issue. And if we need to explore that or make modifications, we would do that. I don't want to release anything that would hurt our country or that would put us on an intel position, in a position of releasing information that we might have on an adversary that could be detrimental to our long-term plans for perhaps collecting more information on them.
Your UAP Disclosure Act laws, the original 64 pages, mentioned, as I said, non-human intelligence, I think 24 times, which is quite incredible. Based on your briefings, do you believe there is evidence supporting those concepts? And how should we, the public, interpret the use of language like non-human intelligence in those proposed amendments?
We wanted to make sure that people knew that we weren't hiding from the possibility, but that did not mean that we had any evidence that it existed. We wanted them to know that we were being open on the possibility, but we did not have evidence of that occurring today. But if we wouldn't have put that in there, then perhaps we would have frustrated them even more by saying, you're not asking for that information, and that's the part that is the juiciest part of it. And honestly, we don't know that it exists, but there's enough concern out there and there's enough information out there that says there are some things that we can't explain, that it's a fair question to ask. And why in the world would we do this and not be as open as possible to things that we don't know anything about? So that's the reason for it.
There's been some criticism of the Pentagon's UAP investigation office, ARO, the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, from people in the House, notably Representative Luna. What's your position on ARO? Is it doing a good job?
I've had an opportunity to meet with leaders from the program. I found them to be open and curious. I don't have any evidence that says that there's in any way a desire to limit their ability to do research or to hide the information that they're doing. I think there are concerns on the part of some people that are very active in the UAP search that thought that this was too close to the administration, or not so much the administration, but too close to the existing power structure, let's just say, and that they may very well be influenced by it. I found our discussions to be pretty frank and open.
There is an ongoing FBI investigation that's operating secretly. I've been approached by some members of that team, and I know they've been talking to a lot of people investigating allegations of federal crimes. Are you aware of that FBI investigation, and have you had any meetings with them?
Let me just say I have not excluded our discussions with FBI officials. I've actually talked to FBI officials to ask questions of them. I have found them to be open and fully disclosing where they have been involved in any investigations concerning individuals or events. And I won't go any farther than that, but I don't see any part of any kind of a conspiracy involving those particular entities. Just the fact that they have been involved in discussions with us, but just as a normal part of our curiosity about what's going on.
Well, is there any possibility that you'd consider bringing into this proposed new UAP disclosure legislation perhaps some kind of mandate that says that, okay, there are all these allegations of federal crimes that have been committed, including, quite dramatically, allegations of murder that have been raised by whistleblowers. This is very serious allegations of capital crimes, federal crimes. Is there perhaps a possibility that you could put a mandate inside that legislation giving the FBI some kind of instruction or diktat about making sure that this is a priority?
I have not pursued that. This is honestly the first time I've ever had that question be asked. I would probably stay away from those types of items of getting involved in telling law enforcement what they have to do. I have not found that to be part of any discussion that I've been involved with. So brand new request that you're asking about today.
We're all waiting for your appearance in the Age of Disclosure film. I know you have a role in the film which is pending, and I understand you support comments made in the film by the now Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, where he raises the concern that, hypothetically, UFOs could pose a national security threat. And I'm just going to repeat what the then Senator Rubio said. He said, "We've had repeated instances of something operating in the airspace over restricted nuclear facilities and it's not ours, and we don't know whose it is, just that statement alone deserves inquiry, deserves attention, deserves focus. Surely, Senator, that comment from the Secretary of State is correct. Any kind of craft operating in our airspace over sensitive national security sites is, by definition, a national security threat.
And I don't disagree with his comment at all. What I do know is I don't know if it's ours or if it belongs to one of our adversaries or if it's one that is neither ours nor theirs. And if it's neither ours nor theirs, I don't know whose it is. But what I know is that those are the types of things that we want to learn more about, and that clearly deserves to have more discussion. But we want to do it in a very reasonable fashion. And so we'll continue to keep our options open with regard to what it might be. But he is correct that there are items out there that we just simply can't explain. And I'm not going to jump to conclusions. I'm going to keep my my options open. I want to make sure that if it's something that one of our organizations in the United States actually is testing or working with, that we not disclose it. If it belongs to one of our adversaries, most certainly we want to make sure that we have all of the information we can gather on it and be prepared to defend against it. And if it's something that is neither ours nor theirs, if it belongs someplace else, then my curiosity really starts to grow at that stage of the game, and I want to be open to those possibilities as well.
Back in 2023, sir, when there was the big hullabaloo about the one Chinese balloon and the three other unidentified objects that entered American airspace, there was a huge outcry because it slowly became clear that what had been happening with the surveillance, the strategic radars at our north, they were filtered in a particular way to exclude objects that weren't perceived as a conventional threat. And the reason I'm raising that now with you is because 2 years on, there are sources telling me that the NORAD SSPAR, the SSPAR radars that are operated by the US Air Force, they've never reported a UAP. But at the same time, US Navy ships operating near these incredibly powerful radars, these huge strategic radars, are reporting UAPs. And it does raise the possibility that we're repeating the same mistake that was made back in 2023. If the US Navy's seeing these things, why isn't the Air Force, is the question that's being asked. Is that an issue that should be of concern?
It's an issue that we were aware of to begin with. It was not a surprise for folks that follow it. There's one type of radar that you use for one type of attack or of one type of objects. There's another type of radar that you use for other types of objects. But I can also share with you that one of the reasons. No, let me put it this way. I can also tell you that particular object was recognized and observed well before it entered our airspace. I'll just and it had nothing to do with a failure on our technology.
Understood. The other possible explanation for why there are no US Air Force NORAD reports on UAPs is that they're somehow withholding UAP data from both ARRO and Congress. And I've been told, Senator, that NORAD does detect anomalous aerial intercepts quite often, but these are not reported to ARRO. And that by the time ARRO gets to hear about them, often from pilots, the data is no longer available. Is there any investigation at all being done into that possibility, given the fact we're paying billions of dollars for these systems? Is it time perhaps for a law that mandates that the US Air Force notifies ARRO of NORAD intercepts to fix this problem?
Let me say this. I think there's more information being shared than what sometimes is disclosed. But there's also the responsibility by our Defense Department to make sure that anything that we're doing with regard to our radars that might be used by our adversaries against us is not going to be disclosed. Those are the types of things and the reasons why we wanted to make sure that any of these types of events, that we are very carefully screening them so that we don't release any information that could be used against us or used to our disadvantage in the future. So I won't get into that. I can just tell you that those types of disclosures that are out there, we do look at, and when we do find out about them, we do get, at least I've seen, reports on what they see and what they don't see. But different types of radars are used for different types of discoveries or different types of observations. And sometimes it's hard to explain, but it's also the reason why we don't talk about it either, is because we don't want our adversaries to know what we're using our radars for or where they're aimed at.
Well, all I can say is we wish you the very best for the reintroduction of the UAP disclosure laws, and we sincerely hope that you can get them through both
I think it'd be a
houses.
step in the right direction.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Senator.
you.
Much
Appreciate the
appreciated.
opportunity to visit with you.
And before we go, please don't forget we do our weekly question and answer, and we need your questions. So please send your questions in by email to realitycheck@newsnationnow.com. Looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.